Good afternoon. My name is Voola. I am 8 years old. The Sustainable Development Goals have a use-by date of 2030. I'll be 22 years old in 2030. So this summit here today is about my future. And I want to ask you all some questions. What kind of world will you create for me in 2030? Will you make sure that I access water freely? Will you make sure that I can see tigers in the wild and not in museums? Will you make sure that I do not earn less just because I'm a girl? Will you make sure that I do not live in a world torn apart by wars? Will you make sure that when I get a job, it will make the world a better place? I think we need to talk to each other. I believe we need partnerships to answer these questions. To talk about partnerships for Sustainable Development Goals, I'd like to invite my father and my mother.
So I think if we can answer any one of these questions, we can leave today solving all the world's problems. So one of the things that I'm an academic at the university, and I've been really interested in poverty alleviation and the role of business, and not as just as charity, but also as a commercial entity. And I've been all around the place. Like I was recently at the United Nations in New York. I've been here at the Unilever Summit on SDGs. What I've actually realized is that in the next 5 years, there'll be tremendous pressure on companies to do something about poverty or tackle climate change or increase gender equality. And I have a hunch that we might end up having a SDG washing. Have you heard of greenwashing? Yeah. So SDG washing is when companies adopt implementing ending poverty because of a marketing exercise. But unlike greenwashing, I think if SDG washing actually occurs, it is very detrimental for the people who are engaged in SDGs. For example, if a company is working with poor people, they're very vulnerable people. So how do you stop companies from engaging in SDGs? Well, I would suggest partnerships, right? So, and the reason I say partnerships is because it shows that the companies are genuine, that they understand that things like poverty and those kind of issues are not something that the business sector or the non-profit sector or the government can do together, right? So if you are buying something and you see an ad in the TV or something, ask yourself, and if you do a little bit more research, look at the partnerships. And I would suggest that that will tell you if a company is actually genuinely engaging in SDGs. And although all of you guys are aware, probably goal number 17 is partnerships, right? And they talk broadly about technology, finance, and capacity building. But today, I would just, Archana, I, and Charvi would like to just focus on, I think, some partnerships that are not really well understood. So can anybody tell me how many people in the world live who are less than 30 years old? What is the percentage? 20% less are 30 years or younger? 50%. 50% of the world's population is younger than 30, right? And there's also research that shows that young people, if you empower them, they're the best at creating innovations. But there's also research that shows that 86% of civil unrest happens in countries where the population is less than 30. So what does that mean? It means that any of these goals, without the young people, it's probably not going to work, right? And it is their future. And there's a great anecdote story from last year's United Nations where Malala was speaking. And as soon as she got up to speak, all the world leaders, Obama and all this kind of people, just got up and started talking to each other. Malala stood right up there and said, "Stop talking," to the presidents and prime ministers. And what she said was, "Don't ignore the young people." And I would challenge all the young people here, if people ignore you, ask why you're doing that. aren't you doing it for me? Right? So I think the challenge for businesses and those kind of things, how do we include young people in decision making? Right? How, for example, can they be board members? Those kind of things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ranjit. So another partnership that I want to talk about at the session today is partnerships with men for gender equality. So what is this idea of gender equality? It seems like a project for women, by women, ironically, women standing here talking about gender equality. But to be more serious about it, anytime the phrase women's empowerment or gender equality is spoken, often men check out, right? And I can give you a very insightful example of that is CEO of a tech company, it's called Lady Geek. Her name is Belinda Palmer. And she talks about this example where in the tech industry, that's her industry, she's always invited to speak on topics of women in tech, because there's not many of them, and how to bridge the gender gap in tech. When she goes to speak, she noticed when she gets up on stage to talk, there's like a mass exodus of men, because they believe it's not relevant to them. It's women in tech for women, how to help them. But how do you bring equality if half, the powerful half, is not at the table? But who are you having the conversation with? In fact, in the tech industry, I would say 3/4 of the powerful, cohort is not there. And I teach at the Faculty of Social Work and Education at University of Sydney, and I've had similar experience as an academic. I go to so many conferences and seminars around the world, my topic being gender equality and women's empowerment. And guess who the majority of the audience is? Yes, yay. And I absolutely appreciate that. More than 85% is women. But if I'm singing to the choir the same song they already know, how are we going to give traction to change? How do I get the powers to be to listen? So although it might sound strange, partnerships with men, but no, we have to explicitly spell out. We need partnerships with men for gender equality, because I believe gender equality is not a women's prerogative. It's a societal imperative. We all need to be on board and we all need to work on it. So in my research studies, I have had opportunities to see how these partnerships can be done. And I'll just give you a small example. I've spent a lot of my time researching microfinance programs. I would think most of you have heard of it, but if you haven't, typically a microfinance loan is a small loan given to poor women to give them an opportunity for livelihood, opportunity for employment, and opportunity for income in places where they don't have that. So I have spent a lot of time in a village called Medak, a small town called Medak in rural South India, where the cultural norms don't allow women to be mobile, to go to the market, to conduct business, to transact. And they're very fixed roles, men, women can do this, men, women can't do this. So in that kind of a space, talking about men's engagement in women's empowerment or men's engagement in gender equality is a very interesting thing I would like to highlight. Because doing business with the poor, there's pros and cons, but at the moment I want to talk about how do we do the engagement bit of it. Often when the loans are given to women, if there is a profit, it's for the household expenditure. If there's a loss, you deal with it for the woman. But the particular program that I was working with would only give loans to women if the male kid's name was on the loan application form. It was a very deliberate, a subtle way to make men responsible for the loan repayment of women. So you see, there's a very subtle ways of doing, of engaging men in the conversation, bringing them into the space. So microfinance is one particular place that I have done research in. And I think what else can be done? We can have, think about other sorts of similar programs of where men can be engaged with, and moving on to the next one, all right, partnerships with experts. Something in the similar lines that I wanted to talk about was all these goals that we see here, are big issues, right? Intractable, really big issues. Hopefully, we will change them. By 2020, we will change it, Charlie, by the time you're 22. I should not use the word hopefully. So hunger, climate change, clean water, poverty, all these big issues need a particular kind of expertise, right? So what are this expertise? We're talking about perhaps somebody researching it half their life, doing a PhD, specialization in the ivory towers of academe, doing lab testing to see if it works or not. Yes, you need these experts to give a particular lens on the issue. But what you also need is another kind of expert, and I'll give you an example from my study, which is poverty. So if I take a traditional expert on what is poverty, if I talk to an economist, what would they say? Poverty would be defined as lack of income or inability to have consumption expenditure, right? So if you conceive poverty in income and consumption, you will try to make programs that increase income, increase consumption, right? But if you asked a woman in Medak, a poor woman in Medak, what is poverty, which is what I did, and she said, oh, poverty is not having social relations. You know, poverty is not having family ties, not having a community to support in time of need. So her conception and then her measurement is in terms of networks, and her solution to the problem is have programs that bring the community together, have programs that increase family bonding. So you see a difference in the sort of a financial understanding of the experts and the financial understanding and the beyond financial understanding of those who are experiencing the problem. So I think these big problems, yes, we need to reframe what is expertise. Maybe we co-create the expertise together, not just with those who have the resources to implement change, but also with those who are experiencing the issues at hand. And I think Ranjit is going to talk a little bit more about
just a conclusion, really.
Experts, yeah.
I think you talked for all of us. So just in...
I get you for that, Ranjit.
I guess in conclusion, when you're thinking about the SDGs, I think one of the major questions you should be asking yourself, it doesn't matter if you're non-profit, government, for-profit, where are my partners? Who are my partners? Should I, think outside the box, if you want to call it? Think about counterintuitive partnerships, because these are complex problems. You will not solve these problems without complex partnerships. It is very difficult, and from my own experience, when something is innovative, they'll say, oh, don't do it. It's the worst thing that happens. So I just like you to, when somebody says that to you, when you say, let's do a partnership with non-profit or for-profit, just think about this quote that Charvi will read out.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Mahatma Gandhi. I can't wait for 2030. Thank you.